Hi, and welcome back. Every so often I get a question via email that simply can't be answered in a brief couple of sentences. This time it's actually 3 questions, plus an exhortation not to spend too long on my reply. Well, simply not possible, I'm afraid. Here's a clever trick, though. If I write my response as a video script, I can recategorize it from high-effort email response to low-effort content creation, and I'll ignore the fact that it's a little bit similar to a previous low-effort video on the basis that that was probably just as forgettable as this is going to be. Anyway, question 1.
How would you define hardware sound? Does it exist in the first place? Why does it seem so hard to reproduce in the digital realm?
Here's an example of the hardware sound. It's when your drum tracks start first, then your backline and vocals join in slightly later when the second ADAT syncs up. Oh, were you not referring to budget 90s digital hardware? I guess you meant analog hardware. Okay, so how about the loud clunk sound that appears on all the tracks of the quarter-inch tape when the owner of the cheapest demo studio in town turns on the t-shirt printing machine in the next room? Stop being facetious, Dan, I hear you say. Obviously I mean high-end vintage analog gear like Neve consoles and Fairchild compressors. So I present to you dirty patch bays, scratchy dirty pots and faders, and random bursts of RF noise that disappear again before you can figure out which channel they're on. Possibly the scratchiest, gnarliest pot I ever encountered was on a Fairchild 660 at Abbey Road. Of course, when you're at Abbey Road you can just shout for a technician to bring you another one, but still. Here's a question for you. Pick a random current pop song from your favourite streaming service and tell me if it was mixed on a console, or in the box, or with a hybrid mix of digital and analog. What, you can't do that? So what exactly is this hardware analog sound you're referring to? Here's what I think. Over roughly a century of recorded music, on a few rare occasions, the stars aligned and blessed a recording session. The songs were good, the arrangements were good, the musicians were cooking, the engineers knew their shit, the producers knew what to ask for. Over the course of decades, the results of those rare sessions have become shared cultural property, while all the crappy and forgettable recordings made in the same studios around the same time quickly got forgotten. Furthermore, when a recording becomes culturally iconic, it kind of doesn't have flaws anymore. They become features instead. I'm going to drop a couple of hot takes here. John Bonham's drums needed more welly down at 50 Hz. Bite me. The horns in Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke are too thin and too dry. Sorry, facts don't care about your feelings. So anyway, the way to achieve the hardware/analog sound you refer to is to write and record an absolute banger, make sure it's hugely successful and preferably comes to define an entire cultural era. Then, decades later, when you're being interviewed about it in your swimming pool full of champagne, tell them you used hardware.
What defines a good emulation for you? Is the priority to reproduce the sound faithfully, expand the possibilities of the hardware, or something else?
A resizable interface. My eyesight is deteriorating. Now I've passed the big 5-0. It helps if I can make the GUI bigger. Better that than my ears deteriorating, I suppose. Also, I want intelligent ways to mitigate the fact that I'm only able to turn one knob at a time. That might mean auto-gain options that weren't on the originals, to reflect the fact that I can't twist an input gain and an output gain simultaneously. Finally, if it has significant nonlinearities that aren't inherent to the intended effect, I want a way to control how much of it I get. I don't hold with this sweet spot gain staging nonsense. I gain stage in such a way that my faders are still close to unity when I'm at the final stages of the mix, so that I can more easily make my final half dB tweaks. I don't want to have to mess that up just to get one plug-in to overdrive nicely. Faithfulness isn't something I worry about too much. I can't check it unless I have the exact same unit they modelled, and even then it might have aged further since they measured it. I want it to sound good and be easy to dial in. Accuracy does matter in one respect, though. It needs to be the same kind of flavour of sound as the hardware it's modelling. Let's consider the total space of all possible compressor algorithms. That's a vast space. Maybe it's infinite. I'm not sure about that. Intuitively, I feel like if you travel far enough in any direction, you'll eventually get to something that can't really be described as compression anymore. So maybe it's theoretically infinite, but practically finite, like a Minecraft world. Anyway, a compressor plugin that allowed you to explore all of that space would be unimaginably complex. Maybe it would need infinite controls to cover the infinity of program dependency options. Even if it were possible to make one with finite controls, using it would be incredibly difficult. How would you go about dialing in a nice FET-style smack for your drums? Well, the practical answer is you delete that plugin and load up an 1176 emulation instead. When you do that, you're making a decision to explore only that relatively small portion of the total space of all possible compressor algorithms that contains FET-style smack, because you already know that's what you want. And the knobs on that 1176 give you fine control over that smack. None of them are going to shoot you light years in the wrong direction in compressor space. You're safely contained within a little FET-style boundary where you know what to expect. In that respect, I think analog emulation is valid and useful. A recognizable interface style is a good shorthand to tell the engineer what type of behavior to expect. It starts to irritate me when the plugin slavishly models aspects that simply don't make sense in a plugin context, like calibrating knobs in dBu instead of dBFS.
Have you noticed major progress in analog emulations recently? Do you think marketing around plugins tends to make people overestimate how much these tools can improve their mixes?
And I think nonlinear saturating filters have got better over the last few years, and that's actually been something I found quite valuable. But for the most part, it's just marketing. It's possible to mix entirely in the box using only your stock plugins and achieve the results that's better than all your references from the 70s, 80s and 90s. You just might have to wait a decade or two before people start to acknowledge it. We live in a capitalist society, surrounded by marketing, and we need to learn to be appropriately sceptical. Buying a Strat and a vintage Fuzzface won't turn you into Jimi Hendrix. Expensive golf clubs won't turn you into Tiger Woods. That skin cream probably won't take 20 years off you. Buying an SSL won't turn you into CLA. That said, though, what we do is a creative endeavour, and it's absolutely okay to use a piece of gear just because you like it. If your dental practice is doing well and you can afford it, go ahead and buy a custom shop Strat that you can barely play. If you're a hobbyist and you can spare the money, why not splurge on analog hardware that just feels good to use? Plenty of amateur golfers buy expensive clubs. And if you're a pro, spending money so you enjoy your work more makes total sense, even if your clients can't tell any difference. At the end of the day, though, training your ears to set a good balance and make good use of EQ is pretty much all that matters, and don't let the gas ever tell you otherwise. That's all. Thanks for watching.